Hey guys, time to finish up chapter 5. We're going to start talking about the derivatives that come from the epithelium of the skin. Talk about the hair and the hair follicles, the nails, the sweat glands, also known as sudoriferous glands, sebaceous glands, or the oil glands. I'm trying a different background. I think this is going to work better though. We'll see. Okay guys, hair on our bodies, especially in our arms and our legs, there's nerves attached to the hair shaft so that when the hair is touched, bent, then it picks up on it. One of the biggest reasons for this is just to let us know that something is on our skin, like a mosquito. Here's your little factoid. The animal that kills more people in this world than any other, it's not lions or tigers or bears, oh my, it is mosquitoes. The diseases transmitted by mosquitoes kill more people than any other animal on this earth. So you can see that knowing that that's the hair and being able to get it before it bites, and I mean, the loss of the blood is trivial, but the cargo it drops off in the form of bacteria and protozoas can be devastating to us. We also have hair on our heads. It keeps the sunlight to a degree. It's not as good as a hat, but it keeps the sunlight kind of off our head. And in the wintertime, it helps to maintain our heat. And also a little bit of a cushion, not much, but there's some. Where do we have hair? We have it everywhere except for our palms and our soles, which are also over thick skin. Our lips are actually hairless. The nipples, and there are parts of the external genitalia that are hairless. That's really a topic for A&P2 when we get there. We'll talk about that. Hair, like skin, like the outer layer of the epidermis, is dead keratinized cells, but it has a hard keratin, which is a little bit more robust than the soft keratin we have in our skin. There are pigments with hairs. There's yellow, there's rust brown, and there's black, with gray and white hair being simply when the hair stops making the hair pigment. Okay, let's see what we got. Flexible strands produced by hair follicles. We've already said that they're dead keratinized skin cells. The shaft where the keratinized is complete, and the root of the hair where the keratinization is going on. This guy is going to extend into the epidermis and out past it on our arm, and it's the hair shaft is actually going to go into the dermis. If you guys remember from the lab, we saw all this. We have a two-layered wall on these shafts of these hairs. Outer connective tissue on the root sheath and an inner epithelial. And let's just see. I wonder why I don't have a picture on here. I made these PowerPoints. I should have had a picture by now. I'm sorry, guys. Have follicle receptors, the root hair plexus. That's what we just got finished talking about, that these are sensory nerving that detects when the hair is moved. And even a light breeze that moves your hair, you can detect it. The erector pili is that muscle that attached to the hair shaft that causes the hair shaft to stand up straight, and when it does that, it kind of pulls down on the skin around the hair shaft, and that causes the hair shaft itself to kind of look like a bump, which is our goosebumps. Oh, finally we got some. Okay, here's our erector pili. The hair shaft, there's the bulb, the hair root. The sebaceous glands, the oil glands, are attached to this. Let me see, guys. I need to move me a little bit so that, there we go, so I don't get in the way of all this. The The cross section, you can see this is a diagram, and of course this is an actual photomicrograph. The follicle wall, the connective tissue, the root sheath, glassy membrane, some of this stuff is not on your lab list, so don't worry too much about it. It's just more or less giving you an indication. An internal epithelial root sheath, and then the hair, the cuticle, the cortex, and the medulla. The cuticle surrounds the cortex, which of course surrounds the medulla. Here's in long section, you can see all of those same areas are present on here, but here you can actually see the hair matrix. This is where the growth is going to be coming from, guys. This is where the point the hair grows. There's the cortex, and this little yellow area is the medulla. This is the papilla. It's at the very bottom of the hair shaft, and of course the matrix lines the top of it. You also have these melanocytes. Remember the melanocytes for the skin? We have them in the hair, helping produce those pigments to give our hair the different colors that folks have. And you see the subcutaneous tissue. This is a really good one right here. You can really see the hair shaft. You can see it going through the epidermis. And actually the epidermis kind of invaginates and brings it in. This is also an area where we see a lot of clinical folliculitis. If bacteria get into that hair shaft, that blind tunnel like that, then they can actually kind of get trapped in there, and it will cause this guy to swell, which will press on your nerves. Folliculitis, furunculosis, carbunculosis, these are all infections. Staph aureus can do it, and others. Now you also have infections on these caused by a bacteria whose species name is acnes. So you can pretty much figure it causes acne. And this is like the whiteheads and the blackheads, but basically what's going on is the bacteria are growing in here, and then because of all the oil production, they're getting trapped in there, and they just keep growing. And acne is just one of those things. There's some good treatments for it, though. As far as the types of hair, we have vellus and terminal. The vellus hair is that very fine body hair that adult females and children have on their bodies. If you ever seen hair on a child's leg or arm, it's very, very light, very soft, very, very fine. Terminal hair is coarse, and this is going to be our eyebrows and our scalp, the axillary regions, and the area in the pubic regions. And of course the face and the neck of males for the beard. Hair growth, the phase weeks to years, variable obviously, and then you have a regressive stage and then a resting phase of 1 to 3 months. The growth phase, 6 to 10 years in the scalp, 3 to 4 months in the eyebrows. It'll grow, and then it'll regress, and then just go into a dormant state, and then the cycle continues onward. Hair loss, there's a lot of things that cause hair loss. Alopecia is hair thinning. Now this happens in both males and females after the age of 40. A lot of females it's not really significant, but sometimes it can be. True frank baldness, which is basically the complete loss, not just thinning, can be determined by especially male pattern baldness, follicular response to DHT. DHT is a type of testosterone. It's dihydrotestosterone, and the more testosterone a male has, the quicker it goes. So males that have high testosterone levels typically will wind up with baldness, at least on the crown. On the sides, it's pretty much what hangs in there. You also get some that can be inherited, as we said. For a male, the mother's father is going to be the determining one. So if your mom's father, your maternal grandfather, was bald, then the son most likely, or the grandson most likely, will be as well. Some little variation in that. Okay, guys, let's jump on over to the nails. These guys are produced again by the living cells in the finger. They grow from the matrix, which is right here. Now, this was on our lab list. It's composed of keratin. The new cells grow there in the matrix, and it pushes out about 1/10 of a millimeter per day. Not very fast. Grow faster in young people, in males, and in the summertime. Afraid that thing, well, that's okay. It's summer. Sorry it didn't take, guys. Fingernails, of course, grow faster than toenails, which probably everybody knows that, have seen it. And the fingernails grow fastest on your hand that you use the most. So if you're right-handed, it'll be right. If you're left-handed, it'll be left. Sweat glands. We talked about this a little bit already, but we'll go through it again. Sweat glands, sudoriferous. We're going to have sweat glands everywhere except on the nipples and on the genitalia. We have the eccrine, which are merocrine sweat glands. Merocrine, it just tells you how the secretion goes. Apocrine are going to be a special class of sweat glands. These guys have epithelial cells that almost act like muscle tissue that contracts and causes the sweat. Sorry, guys. I think I lost my picture. Okay. Sorry about that. I accidentally hit something. Anyway, these glands are going to contract and force the perspiration out. The eccrine, all over the bodies and very heavy on the palms and the soles and the foreheads. If you've ever been out working in the summertime, pushing a lawnmower or whatever, then you'll notice your forehead is going to tend to sweat. As a matter of fact, that's why a lot of sports folks wear sweatbands across the top of their head, because it's an area where you're going to get it. The palms and the soles. The eccrine, we've already talked about. They're the coil. They're pretty simple, and they're tubular. They're not the acinar, but they're going to go straight up, and they're going to end at the pores. These guys are going to release sweat by exocytosis, which is the merocrine, and it's going to put it on the surface of the skin. There, depending on the humidity, the water will be evaporated and absorbed into the atmosphere. When it's absorbed, it's going to take a lot of heat from the body with it. This is the same principle as why it takes forever for water to boil, because you have to put a lot of heat in it to change it from a liquid to a gas state. Sweat is 99% water. There's some salt in it, of course. Some vitamin C, antibodies. Dermocidin is one of those antibacterial chemicals we make. We also have uric acid or urate and urea and ammonia waste products. I mean, if you remember, we said that the skin is also an excretory gland organ. The sweat is controlled by our sympathetic nervous system, mainly to keep our temperature in the right region. We sweat when we're too hot and we're in danger of our internal body temperature rising too high, which will cause damage and cause us to have our proteins, and especially the enzyme proteins, denature, and our biochemistry kind of grinds to a halt. So thermoregulation are their main jobs. Now, it is true that if you get frightened, you will also sweat. That's because the sympathetic system is activated by things, the fight or flight. So in addition to just strictly temperature regulation, it will sometimes go off from emotional reasons. There's the eccrine sweat glands. You can see they're coiled, they go straight up and they end at the pore, and you can see a photomicrograph of that right there. Now the apocrine sweat glands, these guys are going to end on the hair shaft. Yeah, I know the oil glands, the sebaceous glands do too, but these guys kind of look like a cluster of grapes. This looks like a sweat gland, but instead of going to the surface. We'll talk about the apocrine coming right now. These glands are in the axilla and the anogenital region. These are merocrine. They do the same thing, exocytosis. Now, in addition to the water and all this, these guys release a lipids, fatty substance with protein. The secretion itself has no odor, but when the bacteria that are living on the skin come into contact with it, they're going to basically use it as food, and their byproduct is going to be the body odor we characteristically, think of when we think of people that are sweating really hard and heavy. The apocrine glands do not work for children. They only start when puberty hits. They don't help at all in temperature regulation, but like the eccrine, they will be activated in times of pain or stress. Again, sympathetic nervous system, guys. Okay, there's those myoepithelial, there's apocrine glands, and again, another thing showing the apocrine. Just both of these are merocrine, but as far as the way they actually push it out. Some other glands we have, guys, are the ceruminous glands. Those are the glands that make earwax. These are modified apocrine glands, and cerumen is earwax, and we need that because it keeps the little insects out of our ears. It helps to trap them, and eventually, if you don't clean out the earwax, it'll pop out on its own. Mammary glands, and this is something we definitely talk about in reproduction in A&P2, they're actually modified sweat glands, and they produce this fatty substance, human milk, to feed the baby. And that is absolutely the best thing for a baby, is to be breastfed. Okay, let's see. Wax produced by the outer ear opening, and again, it's just to protect the inside of the ear from insects or other things. And there's the epithelial cells, the myoepithelial. Those are the milk ducts. We're going to talk a lot more about this in A&P2, so we're really not going to go into a lot of detail on it at this point in time. Okay, the oil glands, sebaceous glands, they're simple branched alveolar glands. They're all over the body except, again, the palms and the soles. They create an oil called sebum. These guys are holocrine glands. If you remember, that means that they just fill up and then burst. The cell is burst, and then, of course, it's replaced by cells underneath it. These guys put the oil on the hair shaft where it makes its way to the surface of the skin. And it also is going to soften the skin. Also, it's going to help, again, with the waterproofing. But it also contains those antibacterial chemicals that we make in order to keep the bacteria kind of under control. And again, the oil glands don't really work that well during childhood, and they begin at puberty, which is when the oily skin happens and the acne and all that. There's a sebaceous gland, there's a photomicrograph, really good. And again, they're going to be associated with the hair shaft, but they're going to look like a bunch of grapes, unlike an African sweat gland. Okay, integumentary system burns. What can burn our skin? Well, heat from fire, electricity, radiation can do it, some chemicals like acids. The tissue will be damaged, the proteins will be denatured, and the cells will be dead. The main problem with burns, yeah, you've lost your protective barrier against the bacteria, but one of the main problems is going to be fluid loss. You can dehydrate, which if you lose the water and not the sodium, then your electrolytes are going to go awry, and this is really bad. You can lose enough water, you can actually go into circulatory shock, and the kidneys can shut down. So you've probably heard on the news people they're talking about people that were burned over so much percent of their body. There's a couple of ways of estimating that, and I'm sure in the actual burn centers they have a much more sophisticated way, but we generally do the rules of 9. The rules of 9 just says that your head and neck, all total, is about 9% of your body surface. Your arm, an entire arm, is 9%. The front of your trunk is going to be 18. The back of your trunk is going to be 18. Each leg is going to be 18%, and then this little area, the perineum, is going to be 1. And that just gives you an indication of how much of the body has been damaged. Okay. Now, we also classify burns by degree. There's like 6 degrees of burn. Now, this one shows two subdivisions of second-degree burns, and we generally don't use that. I'm sure they do, maybe in a burn center, but first-degree burn is sunburn. The skin is red, it's eventually going to peel, and it's pretty superficial. It's confined to the epidermis, but the nerves are going to be intact, so it's going to be painful. Second degree burns, blisters, when you get those fluid-filled blisters, this is going to be the epidermis and maybe part of the superficial dermis. This also is going to be somewhat painful because some of the nerves are going to be left intact, and they're going to report this as pain. Third degree burns, this is a full thickness burn. It burns basically down to the hypodermis. And in the process, it's going to destroy the nerves. So this one is not going to be painful, but it's one of the more severe types. The skin is going to look grayish white or possibly black. It's going to be necrotic, and you will not have any pain. Fourth and fifth and sixth we'll talk about. I mean, that's really more. So there's a first degree burn, sunburn, or scalding liquids. I mean, if you've ever been burnt by boiling water, this is what it looks like. Second degree, the epidermis and the upper dermis, the blisters, usually relatively minor, unless, and here's some of the exceptions, if you get more than 25% of your body with second degree burns. And again, you're looking at water loss as well as loss of protection against bacteria. There also can be more serious if they're involving your joints or your face or your hands or the genitalia or the buttocks, or if they occur in somebody who has a weak immune system, that someone who's not capable of fighting off as a normal adult could. Here's the third degree burn. Again, full thickness, gray white, cherry red, black. No edema, no pain. Usually the best thing to do with this is to cover it. And the best way to cover the skin is with skin. They can harvest skin from a patient's unburned areas. They can use skin from cadavers. people who've donated their body to science. Sometimes they even use pig skin, and there's also some artificial skin that they can do. But that's what we need to do. We just need to cover it. Third-degree burns are critical when more than 10% of the body is involved. Fourth degree, this is actually a 6th-degree burn. This is not a 4th. This fellow has had a really bad day. Let me move me so you can see. It is burned all the way through to the skull. It has taken out all of the skin and all of the hypodermis and the superficial fascia and everything. It is burned literally to the bone. And of course, he lost one of his eyes in the process. I don't know. I'm guessing this guy was bent over something, maybe a lawnmower, something exploded in a fireball. I don't know, guys. I know I feel sorry for him. That's got to be a terrible, because, I mean, and significantly, it's going to be the part right here that's only lightly burned that are going to be the most painful, because there's no nerves left up here to do. Muscle, tissue, tendons, nerve, charred skin, exposed bone, permanent damage. Oh yeah, oh yeah, that is absolutely permanent damage. I feel for that guy. Okay, guys, last thing I think we've got, let me move out of the way again. Last thing I think we've got is the cancers, the skin cancers. Most of these are going to be benign. They're not going to try to travel and take root in another part of the body. The biggest risk factor for this is overexposure to ultraviolet radiation, either in the sun or, Lord help you, the tanning beds, or frequent irritation of the skin, exposure to some chemicals. And what you would want is to put on sunblock if you're from European ancestry, but even people of tropical with dark pigmentation can still get those under the fingernails. That's not unknown. In any case, skin lotion, some of them have things that help to fix damaged DNA, but the three main kinds that we're going to deal with, and again, I'm sure the dermatologists have more and more complicated, but this is enough for us. Basal cell carcinoma, most common, and it's also the least malignant. It's not really going to be too much danger of it spreading. The basal cell is the stratum basale. Squamous cell carcinoma, second most common, and then melanoma, which is the least common but also the most dangerous. This is the one that will kill you because it will spread to a part of the body that it should not be in and wind up interfering with a vital organ's function. Oh boy, those are too small right there. Okay, actinic keratosis, precancerous, scaly, crusty, gross, and it's going to be in the area that's most exposed to the sun. For most of us, that's going to be our face, scalps, ears, lips, back of the hands, and that's where you're going to see a lot of skin cancers. And of course, folks that wear short sleeves, it can be on their arms too. Atypical moles, these guys are benign, but they can look a lot like melanomas, and those moles have increased chances of becoming a melanoma. So that's something you want to go to. I go to a dermatologist once a year because when I was little, moms encouraged their little boys to run around without shirts because sunshine is good for you. Didn't know. Merkel cell, this is really rare. I've never heard of that. A very aggressive form that has a high risk of spreading and coming back. Now, if you remember the Merkel cells, they're the ones for the light touch. Melanoma, again, the most lethal. UV exposures, or you could be genetically predisposed, but usually it may be both. There's our squamous cell, second most common. Usually it's going to be the parts of your body that's exposed. Back in the day, everybody wore hats, but we got too cool to wear hats, and so we got out in the sun without them, and so we have more skin cancers because you have to pay a price to be cool, right? Basal cell, most common, and we're going to see these in a little bit larger. Oh, I got to get out of the way again. Okay, basal cell carcinoma, stratum basale, slowly invade the dermis and the hypodermis. And this is usually going to be the first one you're going to see on the skin, and again, face, ears, nose, places that are exposed. A lot of these have a pearly sheen. I don't know if you can see there. You can see how it's kind of reflecting light. It almost looks kind of shiny. They call it pearly. Flat, raised, or dome shaped. And the cure for this is the same as the diagnosis. We take a punch biopsy. You take a little cylinder that's sharpened on one end. You just kind of go in there, pull it out, and you take a section of the skin. And that's what you send to pathology, and then they'll diagnose it, but that's also the cure for it. Oops, I'm in the way again. Squamous cell carcinoma. These guys are going to come from the stratum spinosum, the keratinocytes. Scalp, ears, lower lips, and hands. These guys, if you look at them, you can see it looks like they're kind of got a pit right there. They're ulcerated. Raised, crusty, or scaly. It's going to look very abnormal. And again, it's going to appear on the areas of your body that's been most exposed to the sun. And here's our bad boy, the melanoma, highly metastatic, resistant to therapy, chemotherapy, wide surgical. Oh, I should have told you guys. As far as this guy, what they do is they do a football-shaped incision and try to get clean margins. In other words, make sure that we've got tissue that doesn't have any abnormal cells, and that lets us know that we've got it. Forgot about that. Anyway, surgical excision, immunotherapy. 96,400 diagnosed. I don't know if that's the latest. And about 7,000 die from this. So melanoma will kill you. Now, melanoma, we have the ABCDE on the how to tell. The A is asymmetry. So if you look at a circle, a perfect circle, and if you divide it in half, both halves look like, it looks like one, it's a mirror image of the other. But this guy is so irregular that you could cut it in any plane and it's still going to look asymmetrical. The next thing is the borders. So that's symmetrical, that's asymmetrical. Those borders are pretty regular, but if you look at this, they're kind of erose. They've got all these grooves and so forth. The third thing is the colors. These guys can be blue, black, brown. They can have a variety of colors, and a lot of times they're multicolored. So if you've got a multicolored mole, you probably want to go to a dermatologist and let him look at it. Next thing is diameter. These guys are typically going to be bigger than 5 millimeters, which is the diameter. Let me make sure I'm right there. Diameter of a pencil eraser. And then finally, the E on this is evolving. It's constantly changing. Well, guys, that finishes up the skin, so we're in good shape. Hope I didn't gross you out with too many of these pictures. Didn't try to gross you out, but I did try to give you kind of an idea of what you're going to have to see. But most of the time, those kind of 4th, 5th, 6th degree burns, you're not going to see. Those are going to a burn center. They may come in just temporarily long enough to get stabilized, but more than likely they're going to be life flighted to the burn center. We have one in Augusta. That's where the burn center is. All right, guys, that's got it. I'll see you in chapter 6, bone tissue.